So you've made it this far, you've gotten past all the notes and the scales and the relative minors. Now you get to learn chords. There is still some theory involved, but chords actually sound cool, so it's sort of worth it. So what is a chord? It's a great question. A chord is almost always 3 notes that are played at the same time. There are some chords that are 2 notes, but people argue whether or not those are actually chords. But something like this, those sound like chords to me, so let's just say chords are more than 1 note played at the same time. Technically, if you play a chord like this, that's called an arpeggio, but it's based around the shape of a chord, so we're just gonna call that a chord too. But why do some chords sound nice and some a little like poop? Both of those are chords. The first one was just an F major. The second one is an augmented C#7. The first kind of chord was a major chord, and every major chord has an equivalent minor chord. When you're learning songs, a vast majority of the time, the chords will be either major or minor. You may come across a 7 chord every once in a while, but we'll get to those later. For now, let's just focus on the big 2, major and minor. So how do you figure out what a C major chord is? You could just look it up on the internet, but you probably want to know how and why a C major chord is a C major chord. So let's go to the piano. If you remember our C major scale, the first thing we do is give each of those notes a number. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then 8. So E is the 3 in C major. We just say the 3 or the 3rd. We don't say the 3rd note or note number 3. It's just how us music cats talk. If we were playing the A major scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, E would be the 5. My point is, these numbers aren't assigned to a specific note. They are relative to what key you are in. So if we go back to our C major scale, a major chord is formed by playing the 1st, the 3rd, and the 5th note together. So if we move up to D, and we want to play the D major scale, remember the whole, whole, half formula. So we go whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. So we get the 1st note, D, the 3rd note, F sharp, and the 5th note, A. And that's a D major chord. And we can apply that same thing to any note to get the major chord. So let's do C sharp. We do the C sharp major scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We get the 1, the 3, the 5, and that's C sharp major. I used to write down which notes were in which major chord just to help me remember, but I don't know if that helps. You do you. Okay, cool, we can make major chords, but what about minor chords? Minor chords are super easy to figure out once you know the major chord. All you gotta do is flatten the 3rd note. So if this is a C major, we get the 3rd note, and we flatten it a half step. So a C minor chord looks like this. What's interesting is that you can go from happy to sad with only changing 1 note. So let's do that to D. If you remember, this is the D major chord. So we flatten this note, the 3rd note, and that's a D minor chord. Major, minor. So now we can pretty much find any major or minor chord. And in case you haven't figured out, we use a little M next to the note to mean minor. If the chord is by itself, then that is just a major chord. Sometimes people will use a big M to mean major, or they'll write maj or min next to the chord. Some people will use a dash to mean minor, but for the most part, just D means D major, D and a little M means D minor. So let's move to the ukulele. The ukulele is going to present some problems when we're trying to figure out chords. Let's start with the C major scale. So we have open C here, so we'll play the scale. So to find the 1, 3, and 5, we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have the notes of the major chord, but the 3rd note and the 5th note are on the same string, and you can't play 2 notes on the same string at the same time. I could try doing something like this. I'll move the scale over to here because this C is the same as this C, so I'll play the C scale but starting up here. So the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 3, 5. And there we have the same problem. The 3rd note and the 5th note are on the same string. But I can move this note down here, so now I can play the 1, the 3, and the 5. And that's a C major chord. Okay, all that is great, but it's not really ideal. The truth is that making chords from scratch on the ukulele is a little more complicated than on the piano. Like, I can play the C major scale and then find the notes like C, D, E, F, G. So I know the 1, 3, and 5 are C, E, and G. So then I can find those 3 notes, C, E, and G, on the ukulele. So this string open is C, this string open is E, and up here we have open G. Play them together and you have a C major chord. Cool, mad easy, all open strings. So a couple things you may have noticed. So I'm playing the 1, the 3, and the 5, but the 5 is a lower note than the 1 and 3. And that's totally fine. All we need to make sure is that the 1, 3, and 5 are in there somewhere. In fact, we can play this C major chord, and this C major chord, and this C major chord, and those are all fine because they all contain the notes C, E, and G. Those are called chord inversions, and we'll get to that later, but just remember that the order of the 1, 3, and 5 aren't important. The other thing you may have noticed is that I'm only playing 3 strings, and this baby's got 4 strings, so what gives? Well, a major chord only has 3 notes, so what do we do with that extra string? What we do is we just repeat one of the notes on that string. So we can repeat either the 1, the 3, or the 5. So in the case of C major, we can add either a C, an E, or a G. There's a C right here, so we can add that to the chord, and we've got a sick 4-string chord. I bet that you've already learned how to play this C somewhere else on the internet, but now you know what it's made of. You know its essence. So let's switch over to a minor chord, and just to make things interesting, we'll also switch to D. So let's find D. We know this is C, so that's C sharp, and this is D. So the D major scale is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So if we count the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we see that the 3 and the 5 again are on the same string. So we can move this guy up here, and now we have the 1, the 3, and the 5, and that's a D major chord. But wait, we want to make a minor chord, so how do we turn a major chord into a minor chord? That's right, we flatten the third note. So we have the 1, the 3, and the 5, and we flatten the third note to here, and now we have the 1, the flat 3, and the 5, D minor. Oh man, it just got super sad. So now we have the ability to build our own minor and major chords from scratch on the ukulele. But the truth is that playing the scale, writing down the 1, 3, and 5, and then finding those notes on the ukulele and putting it all together, that's kind of an annoying way to find chords. There are charts that will just show you what all of the notes are on the neck, and that might make things a little easier. Or you could just go to a website like ukebuddy.com, which I actually use all the time, and then you just punch in what chord you want and it'll just show you how to play it, which I think is okay because now you'll know why that chord is that way and why it isn't some other way. Really, I'm assuming that the reason you're watching these videos is because you want to understand what's going on under the hood. And that's it. See you next time. Good luck. Have fun.